Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. You know who it is. I am your host, as always, going solo dolo on this beautiful day here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Kayvon, that's your boy, and super excited to be here with you wherever you guys are, whenever you're listening to this, and of course, however you're listening to this, because it is 2020, and there are so many different ways to listen to this podcast, so there's really no reason not to, right? Tune in for a little bit. I know it's long. You don't have to listen to it all in one sitting. Tune in a little bit. Get yourself some food. Get yourself some snack. Whatever you're doing throughout your day, go back to work. Go back to doing what you got to do, and then tune back in, because I got a lot of things to go and to talk about. This great, really, what are we heading into now? Week 11. Can you guys believe that? We are now heading into week 11. No, excuse me. We're heading into week 10. So we just finished up week 9. We're heading into week 10, which then means we've got, including that week, we've got 8 weeks left. That's crazy. 8 weeks left before playoffs, including this upcoming week. So that's the season flies by. I always say it about NFL and college football. It's a blast. It's my favorite sports to watch by far. But you snap your fingers and it's Thanksgiving. You snap them twice and the season's over. So but hey, it's been a great season so far. We've gotten through without having to cancel a single game. That is major props to the NFL. That is huge props to the NFL and what they've done with their protocols and the way that they've really set up these areas and areas of making sure that teams social distance, making sure that players follow rules, the way that they've actually fined teams and got really punished teams for not cooperating. We just saw them really come down hard on the Raiders for numerous times, being lenient with their COVID-19 protocols, and that's completely understandable. You shouldn't have to warn a team more than once. Really, you shouldn't have to warn a team at all. But if they're going to do it, then you shouldn't have to warn a team more than once during this COVID-19 area. This is no joke. This virus kills, even if they are professional athletes in great shape. It's still no joke. So the fact that we are now heading into week 10, the NFL deserves a lot of props, but the NFL players, coaches, and personnel deserve the most props. They all deserve props. Everyone is on the same page, and everyone deserves a clapping hand. All right? Everyone deserves that. But when you're looking at the people, because you can have the best protocols in place and you can have the worst protocols in place. It does not matter unless the players and the coaches and the staff and personnel follow the rules. And the rules of being disciplined in terms of not going out, when you're outside of the facility, in terms of making sure your family doesn't go out during the day or night and come back home, in terms of possibly having to leave your family, stay in a hotel for a couple months in a bubble type atmosphere. I know some teams are doing that. Like, this is not easy. This is very hard. The NBA went through it. The MLB went through it to an extent with their playoffs. The NHL went through it, and it's tough. It's very, very tough. But if you want to make it work, and they're making it work for themselves, of course, so that they can get paid, but they're also making it work for us, fans. Let's not get it twisted, okay? Yes, of course, they want to get paid, and that's why they're making it work, but they love us fans. We make the sport continue. If no one's watching, there is no sport. So they love that, and they appreciate that. So it's really, really cool to see leagues come together, work together with their, the players' organization and the NFL as a whole, and really work together and say, hey, let's get this done the right way. Now, there's a lot of big news that leads into this COVID-19, and before I get into that, I just want to kind of set the stage for what we're doing today. It is a busy, busy Tuesday as we head into Week 10. We're now 9 weeks into the season. We are starting to get a really interesting picture of who the top teams are in the AFC and who the top teams are in the NFC. We have some teams slipping. All right, who's slipping? Are we worried about a couple of these teams? Do we have some teams on the rise? Are we excited? Do we feel like this is more to come? We're going to break all that down. The beat down in Tampa, all right? The Tampa Bay Bucks cannot get past the New Orleans Saints. Like I say it all the time. When I'm right, I'm going to say I'm right. When I'm wrong, I'm going to say I'm wrong. I told you guys I didn't think the New Orleans Saints were going to be a good team this year. I said that they would either miss the playoffs or they would slip in right at the end. They are clearly exceeding those expectations. I still do not think that they are a Super Bowl team. I do not even think that they are a team that will win a playoff game. But I will take back them not making the playoffs. They will make the playoffs. They're 6-2 now. It would take an epic collapse for them not to make it. So they will make the playoffs. But I do not see them really going any further than that, unless they run into the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who for some reason, the New Orleans Saints are their kryptonite. And I don't get why. But I looked at the film. For you great listeners, I said I'm going to do my homework. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper. I'm going to rewatch this game. And I'm going to come up with an explanation for what is going on. And I have a little bit of one. It's a mix. It's definitely a mix of things. But there is someone that you can put the most blame on. There is someone that did not come prepared. And I'm going to tell you who that is. Now, all the blame does not roll on this one person. The blame is mixed between numerous people and the entire team itself. But one person, and it's not just for this game, it's moving forward as well. And if they don't change this up, this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team will end up not meeting expectations and probably not even getting close to it, to be frank. So we're going to get into that. Really busy day. We're going to get into the Pittsburgh Steelers. They held on to stay undefeated, the only undefeated team left. Kansas City had a little bit of a scare from Carolina, but they came back and won that. Are the Pittsburgh Steelers for real? Yes, they are. Do not let some little trap game that Mike Tomlin and the Steelers were not prepared for throw them off guard. They were playing, this is still the NFL. The Cowboys have played much better over the last 2 weeks. They are clearly starting to fight more. They're clearly starting to play more. And I appreciate that, and I'm sure actual Dallas Cowboys fans do too, because it was pathetic what was happening earlier. But they've come to play now. And just because they've had a bad year, they still are an NFL team. They're still playing with a quarterback. The Steelers were playing against a quarterback that they've never seen on film before. So that was tough out of the gate. And let's just be honest. It was a trap game. They beat the Baltimore Ravens the week before. They were riding high. They were ready to go. And now they have another divisional opponent against the Cincinnati Bengals this week. Everyone was talking about they're going to dominate this game, blah, blah, blah. I don't really look into it that, oh my goodness, they almost lost. At the end of the day, they won. And at the end of the day, they're still sitting there undefeated at 8-0. And that is pretty impressive. Now, what does worry me is that Big Ben got shaken up. And the last thing I want to see at Big Ben's age is him getting shaken up, but it looks like he'll be all right. But that's something to look into going forward. Now, it's going to be interesting to see if, and we'll get into this deeper, but if the Pittsburgh Steelers start to get a little bit of a bigger lead, because remember, no one's talking about Baltimore because they're not lighting it up on offense. But that defense is playing outstanding. And Baltimore actually has a better point differential than Pittsburgh. Baltimore is plus 85 point differential. Pittsburgh is only plus 74. Baltimore played an atrocious game on offense against the Steelers, and it still came down to the final play where Baltimore was driving and had a chance to score. Lamar turned the ball over 4 times that game or 3 times that game, and they still came down to the final play. So everyone's writing off Baltimore where they're still hanging around at 6-2. They're creeping right in there, and they just keep on winning. So the problem with that is the Steelers are sitting at 8-0, and usually when you're at 8-0 in your division, you have a good lead on the division, right? So you can kind of relax a bit, which would be perfect for the Steelers because they could rest Big Ben. I think it's very important if Big Ben is really banged up for them to get a couple of games of rest for Big Ben before the playoffs come. Because I'm just going to be straight up honest. You know this. I know this. Everybody that's watched a single down of football that Mason Rudolph has played knows this. He is a bad quarterback. And they are not winning a game in the playoffs with Mason Rudolph as their quarterback. It's just not happening. That defense is amazing. It's the best defense in the league. But I do not care. You are not winning a playoff game with Mason Rudolph as your quarterback. So if Big Ben is really banged up, and if for some terrible reason he gets banged up even more in the next couple games, you got to find a way to sit him. And that's why I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are really looking right now and circling their calendar for the Thanksgiving night game. Remember, I said this the other show. The Steelers play the Bengals this week. Then they're at the Jaguars. And then they are home to the Ravens on Thanksgiving night on NBC. Thanksgiving night, 8 p.m., Steelers versus Ravens. Wow, I cannot wait for that. Get your turkey, get your stuffing, get your mac and cheese. My mom's famous mac and cheese. I'll eat that up all day. And then you'll be full, depending on when you eat. We usually like to eat in the afternoon, so I'll be nice and full. I'll grab a glass of wine or I'll grab a beer, depending on what I'm feeling. Maybe even grab out a shot. And I'm going to sit on the couch, fat, happy, maybe a little sassy, and I'm going to watch this game, and I'm going to be very excited about it. And I can't wait. I cannot wait. But about this game, the Steelers are circling it. They're taking their pins right now, and they're circling this game because if the Steelers beat the Ravens, that means they would have beat them twice this season, which means they would have 2 games up on them just from beating them twice, not even including the record. They already have 2 games up on them because the Steelers have 0 losses and the Ravens have 2. So if they beat the Ravens, it would take the Steelers losing a total of 3 games from there on out for the Ravens to be able to pass them. Does that make sense? So what I'm getting at is if the Steelers can beat the Ravens on Thanksgiving night when we're all full, happy, maybe a little sassy with our drinks watching this game, then that gives them true ability to sit Big Ben for a game or 2. After that, they have the Washington football team. That's a game they could easily rest Big Ben. They're at the Bills for Sunday Night Football. I mean, depending on where they're at with their record, again, if they win that Ravens game, you probably want to play Big Ben that night. But again, the playoffs are the most important thing. And then you end the season with the Bengals, the Colts, and the Browns. Okay? So, depending on what they do for these next couple games, and then most importantly, if they beat that Ravens team, they can look at sitting Ben for a couple games to get him full on healthy. Now, I don't know if Big Ben will like that. He might say it gets him out of his rhythm and all that stuff. Most likely, you probably want to try and have him. I mean, most likely they would probably rest him and the starters the final game of the season anyways, unless for some reason they're trying to go 16-0, which maybe that is a goal of theirs. It might be. But at this age of Big Ben, yeah, going 16-0 is awesome. Yeah, trying to be the first undefeated team since the Dolphins is awesome. But at the end of the day, winning the championship is the most important thing. And you're not going to do that unless you have a healthy Big Ben. And I don't mean a 50%, a 75%, or even a 90%. You need a 100% healthy Big Ben. Because there's going to be someone on the other side of the field eventually in the playoffs, and his name is going to be Patrick Mahomes. And he is going to light it up. I don't care how good your defense is. He is going to light it up. And the only way you're going to beat him is if you can go toe-to-toe with him. The only way you beat the Chiefs, there is no more slowing down this offense. That does not happen. That's not a thing anymore. I know going into the offseason, the conversation was there's two ways to beat the Chiefs. You can build an amazing defense and slow them down, or you can outscore them. The first option is done. They will find a way to eventually break free and score. They will. The play calling is too good, and the weapons are too good. They're too potent. They will eventually break out. So, what do you have to beat the Chiefs? You have to have a good defense that can make plays in critical moments, and you have to have an offense that keeps you in the game throughout the game. In other words, you have to have an offense that can go toe-to-toe. They score, you score, they score, you score, and then you have to have a defense that eventually will make a stop, eventually will make a sack, eventually will make an interception, make a fumble recovery, something like that to then get your offense the ball back, where they then have to take the lead from there. And if you don't have an offense that can do that, then again, having that type of defense is pointless. So that is why it's going to be so critical for Big Ben to be healthy. All right, this isn't going to be like leading a comeback against the Dallas Cowboys. No, this is the defending champs, the Kansas City Chiefs. And the only way to do that is to have a great offense. And with Big Ben, they have a great offense. With Big Ben healthy, the Pittsburgh Steelers are the best team set up to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. They really are. Because they can sling the ball all over the field. They have their receivers to score points. They have a good tight end in Eric Ebron. They can control the running game if they really put their attention to it with James Conner and Benny Snell. And they have a defense, most importantly, that can make plays at big moments. Right? And they have a very good defense, too, that can get to the quarterback. That's another thing with Mahomes. Now, Mahomes is quick. He's shifty. He can move. He can move his legs. So having a good pass rusher isn't as big of a deal unless it would be if you were going up against Tom Brady and the Patriots back when he was on the Patriots. That was always Tom Brady's kryptonite. It was get pressure up the middle, make Brady uncomfortable, make him not have time to throw. Boom. It doesn't really work that way with Mahomes because of Mahomes' legs. But the pass rush can get him to force some things where then your guys on the back end like Minka Fitzpatrick can make some plays and some interceptions. Because let's just be real. That Steelers secondary, you can throw on them. As good as their defense is, their secondary is a little rough. You can throw the ball on them. But what they have been able to do is make plays at big times, make interceptions at big times, make sack and fumble recoveries at big times. And that's what you would have to do against the Chiefs while your offense goes out there and scores. And when you have guys like Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson and Juju Smith-Schuster, who looks like he's starting to really get going, Eric Ebron, James Conner. You have these type of James Washington even, these type of workhorses, speedsters, great route runners, big men, every type of weapon out there. That is big time as long as your CEO, your orchestrator, is 100% healthy. Because we all know how good Big Ben is when he's healthy. We've all seen it, and it's been great. So my takeaway from that Cowboys game is don't worry. Don't worry about how they played. It was a trap game. I could care less that they almost lost to the Cowboys because guess what? Almost doesn't get you anywhere. They lost. If almost got us anywhere, then I would be sitting here super happy because my Falcons would be 7-2 and they'd be in first place in the NFC East. But almost doesn't get us that fumble, that onside kick that we didn't dive on. Almost doesn't get us that interception that went through our hands against Nick Foles where it turns into a win. So it just doesn't. The Steelers got the win. They're 8-0. But the biggest issue I have is what's wrong with Big Ben? Is he okay? Are those knees going to be okay? And if not, where can you start to rest him? Don't worry about going 16-0. Where can you start to rest him? Because the most important thing, you don't have Big Ben for much longer. Okay, he's getting older and older. He's playing great this year. I get that. But he is getting older and older by the year. He's a player that's banged up a lot. Plays through injuries a lot. I don't know how much he keeps wanting to put his body through that. Probably only have a couple years left of him. This is the team to do it with if you're going to try and win one more Super Bowl. But you're not going to do it without a healthy Big Ben. So this is going to be Mike Tomlin's biggest challenge from here on out. Trying to look at the team, understanding those players in that locker room are going to want to go 16-0. Of course they are, right? They're players. They got egos. They want to do something great. They want to do something historical. But the head coach has to be the one with the head on his shoulders, the one that says, "Hey, I get it. I would love to do that too. But guys, at the end of the day, flaunt that Super Bowl ring, Mike Tomlin. At the end of the day, guys, we want one of these. We want one of these. And to get one of these, we need number 7 healthy. We need Big Ben healthy. And to do that, we got to set you down for a couple of games, Big Ben. It's going to be tough, but that's what I would do if I was Mike Tomlin. And we'll see what he does and the Steelers do from here. Busy show here. This is the GSMC podcast. The GSMC football podcast. I'm your host, Kayvon Izami. Really busy show. When we come back, we are going to move back into what the NFL has come down and decided today. It is really big news for all you fans out there that are sitting with teams that are right outside the playoffs right now, or maybe even a little bit farther, but they're going on a run. There is some hope for those teams. Also, a very pivotal rule that the NFL just came up with that is going to make this league even better moving forward, and I'm very glad that they came up with it. We'll dissect it all. We'll talk about it all right after this. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
This is the GSMC Football Podcast. The GSMC Football Podcast is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kayvon Izami, going solo dolo on this great Tuesday, and we appreciate you guys for listening to the show. Lots to do going on today. You know, we started the show talking about the Steelers had a little bit of a scare versus the Cowboys, but they came out with a win, and that's all that matters to me. I was proud of the Cowboys for showing some fight, for playing hard. At least, you know, Tony Pollard is, Zeke still is, I don't know what's going on with him. But most of that defense played better. The offense played better. Garrett Gilbert, coming out of the AFL or whatever, played better. So there was a lot of bright spots there in that Cowboys team, who I've been very hard on. So I'm happy that I get to say that this time. But all that matters is the Steelers got to win. They're 8-0. The biggest thing to worry about is that Big Ben injury. Now, the Steelers had someone, their tight end, Vance McDonald, test positive for COVID-19 after the game, and Big Ben was someone that was in close contact with him. So he is being separated right now. He's working remotely from home until they make sure that he is fully negative and a couple negative tests come back. That's a new rule that the NFL has implemented. So you'll start to see a lot of headlines. It started last week of like blah, blah, blah was placed on the COVID-19 IR list, right? Big Ben was placed on the COVID-19 IR list. We saw Baker Mayfield was placed on the COVID-19 IR list. Same with Matt Stafford. But all of those guys ended up, Matt Stafford ended up playing. Baker Mayfield was on a bye, but it looks like he'll end up playing this week. And it looks like Big Ben will too. They put that there just to say, okay, since he was close, since he was in the contact tracing of someone that actually did test positive, we are going to send him home until we know for sure that he's negative, you know, that his results come back negative. And not just one result, but numerous results. And the NFL is trying to do that so they don't create outbreaks, which is very smart. So right when they see someone with that contact tracing, they send them home. And that's smart. It's very smart of the NFL to do that. But you'll start to see more of those headlines pop up, because when someone does test positive, unfortunately, usually there is a mass or a good amount of people that are near that person, so they're going to be sent home for contact tracing, just like the Ravens. I think this past week the Ravens had about 10 players on defense that were sent home, and it said that they were on the you know, IR COVID list, but really they were just on there from contact tracing, and they say that. So just, you know, make sure you read. Don't just read the main headline. Read a little bit into the story to get a good idea of what that meant and what's actually going on there. All of those players on the Ravens ended up playing, other than just the one that tested positive. So that's the big thing to follow these days. Again, props to the NFL, props to the players, the coaches, and everyone for, you know, really being disciplined enough to get to week 10 here. Of course, we've had some scares. We've had some, you know, rough moments with the Titans and the Raiders, but to only have one team really have an outbreak like that, a for real outbreak, that's very impressive. And hopefully we can keep it going. Now, the breaking news, and a lot more to do on this show. We're going to talk about the Monday night game. I've got a lot to say about Cam Newton. I think Cam Newton played a very good game on Monday night. I think the Patriots are a bad football team, just like the Jets are. But Cam Newton played a good game, and that's exciting to see for his career moving forward. And what does it mean for his career? Is Cam Newton playing? A lot of people say, hey, look, the Patriots, you know, they can still slip into that wild card. I'm not looking at that, all right? I was wrong on the Patriots. I thought that Bill Belichick was going to be a mastermind enough to get this roster, but it turns out nobody would be able to get this roster ready to go. It's just a bad roster. The Jets have better weapons than the Patriots do, but they were able to slip away from the Jets because Cam Newton was able to play a little bit of hero ball. He was able to rally this team, and they won. So we're going to talk about what this means for Cam Newton's career moving forward. We'll get into that. But to continue on this COVID topic first, the NFL met and the competition committee met this week. Met today, actually. The owners and the competition committee and everyone met this week to decide that if they were going to look into expanding the playoffs this year. Now, remember, the NFL has already expanded the playoffs for this year and years moving forward. Like, this is a set rule now where there will be 7 wild card teams from each conference, right? It used to be 6 and 6. Now it is 7 and 7. And that is not a COVID-19 rule. That is a set in stone. That's how it's going to be from here on out, okay? So that's done. So this year, we have 7 teams. So we have one extra team that's going to make the playoffs. But for this year alone, the NFL has decided that if, and this is a big if, guys, so don't go around saying, or don't think right away that, okay, there's going to be more than 7 teams in the playoffs. What the NFL and the competition committee has decided is that if there are games to be canceled because of COVID-19, because what they're looking at here is they're saying, okay, we are now at the halfway point of the season. We're actually now a little bit past it, which means we're running out of bye weeks. A lot of teams have already had their bye weeks. So if a team was to have a breakout or an outbreak or was to have a good amount of positive tests and they already had their bye week, we would have to cancel that game. So if we have to cancel that game, we would then expand the playoffs further to a 16-team bracket. So we'd go from 14 teams, 7 on each side, AFC, NFC, to 16 teams, 8 on each side, AFC, NFC. Now, it was not immediately clear how many games would need to be canceled for the 16-team bracket to be enacted, okay? We're not sure about that yet. Roger Goodell said today's resolution is part of our contingency plan should it need to be. So that is the biggest part, right? This is strictly based off of now that they're moving into the second half of the season, now that most teams are going on their bye weeks or have already been on their bye weeks. For example, to just make this a little bit more simple, the Atlanta Falcons have a bye week this week, okay? Say they come back from their bye and in 2 weeks they are supposed to be playing the Raiders and they have an outbreak, okay? I pray, God forbid that doesn't happen, but if that does, they already have used their bye. The Raiders have already used their bye. So that is 2 teams that already have a bye. So you would have to cancel that game if you weren't able to maneuver it around later in that week. Which means if you had to cancel that game, you start to get to a murky situation of, well, wait a second. And the Falcons are out of the playoffs right now. So for the Raiders instance, well, and this is actually perfect because it looks like the Raiders will be fighting for a wild card spot with teams like the Browns and the Dolphins. And there's a bunch of teams in the AFC right now that are 5-3 and that are going to be really fighting for those final 2 wild card spots. So it's going to become to say, well, wait a second. Just because the Dolphins played a game more than us, they're going to get in. Well, if we played that game, we could have won too. So it starts to get into what we would call a competitive disadvantage, right? And that's why the NFL is looking at it this way, which I actually like. I actually think that's cool. And again, this is just for this year, and this is only if they have to cancel games. Now, we don't know how many games. I have a feeling it's going to be based on the exact game that it is, too. Like, I feel like that has to happen, right? Like, if you were to cancel a game between the Giants and Washington, and why would that matter? Because both of those teams aren't going to make the playoffs anyways, right? So I think it would have to be a game that is that involves a team that is going to make the playoffs or are going to be close to making the playoffs. And I think that's even more important. If you get a team that's fighting for that wild card spot or fighting for a division spot, and it looks like they might end up losing out on it all because they didn't get to play one more game like everyone else did, that's when it's going to become an issue. So that's what we're going to have to watch and see how they start to clear this up. I have a feeling the reason why they haven't said the exact number of games that would have to be canceled is because they want to be able to see what type of games, depending on how important those games are and the teams that are in it. So that's going to be very interesting to watch moving forward. But, hey, for all you teams out there, all you fans out there of teams that are right outside the playoffs or going on a little bit of a run, that gives you some hope, right? That should give you some hope going forward. I mean, you got a lot of teams right now that are in the AFC at 5-3. You got the Raiders, the Dolphins, the Browns, the Colts. All right, that is 4 right there. All 4 of those teams will not be able to make the playoffs. In fact, only depending on, you got the 4 division winners. So that means you would only have 3 teams out of those 5, 3 teams out of those 4. Actually, it would only be 2 teams because then you'd also have the Baltimore Ravens in there at 6-2. So they would take up a spot, which means only 2 other teams could get in. So that means like right now the Browns and the Colts would be left out. So this opens up the door for more teams like that. And then you got the Broncos at 3-5, the Patriots at 3-5. If those 2 teams went on a run, which is possible for sure, then maybe they have a bit of a chance. And same with the NFC. The NFC is very crowded as well. You got a bunch of teams at 6-2. You got a couple teams at 6-3. You got some 5-3, some 5-4, some 4-5. So a lot of teams in the mix there as well, which will be interesting to see how that goes from there. But that's exciting, right? It's exciting. Obviously, we don't want any of these games to be canceled because that means we might have an outbreak or something. But if a game was to be canceled, we might end up seeing a couple more playoff games, which is pretty cool. Now, we do have some other big news that the NFL announced today, and this has been a long time discussion. This has been about a 10-month discussion ever since this offseason went down, and it was all about aiming to boost the likelihood that teams will seek out and start to hire minority coaching and executive candidates, right? So what the league did is they approved a resolution to reward teams with draft picks if one of their minority coaches or personnel people is hired to be a head coach or general manager. So does that make sense? So in other words, say a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, who their offensive coordinator is Eric Bieniemy, and he has been their offensive coordinator he's been on their staff for a good while. He's been on their staff since 2013, to be exact. He was the running backs coach from 2013 to 2017, and then he got promoted to the offensive coordinator 2018, and he's been OC ever since. So 3 years now he's been the OC. So that is a minority. Eric Bieniemy is black. That is a minority that has been with this team, the Kansas City Chiefs, since 2013. 7 years, right? So if he went and said, hire, say the Houston Texans or whoever, it doesn't even matter, hired him this offseason, the Kansas City Chiefs, now I don't know if this is specific for this team, but this is, for example, the Kansas City Chiefs would receive 2 third-round compensatory draft picks. Okay? So they would receive 2 compensatory draft picks given to them by the NFL because they had a minority in their program who they helped develop, they helped promote, they help them, get promoted from running backs coach to OC, and then this year he's going to be a head coach. if he doesn't, that will be the biggest crime in the world, but that's not going to happen because he is a fantastic offensive coordinator, and my Falcons would be so lucky to get him. I would love to get him, even though I do think the interim coach we have now, Raheem Morris, who is also a minority, is doing a great job, and I wouldn't be mad if we hired him full time as well. But I do think, having an offensive guy like Eric Bieniemy would be pretty cool. So that's what they've decided to do. And again, they've been working on this for a long time. There's been a wide discussion that not even just in the NFL, in all leagues, that there's just not enough minorities being hired in big-time positions like head coach and general manager. And that's just unfortunate because most of these leagues, the majority of the percentage is African-American when it comes to the players. And it's it's like, why can't we get some coaches and some executives in there as well? Because there's a lot of very, very smart minorities out there that are qualified for this job, and the question becomes, why aren't they getting it? And it's not saying that any of these owners are against that or anything like that, but this just gives more of an incentive to make it happen. Now, it's a whole other discussion to say, should they have to do something like this? No, of course not. You wish that there wouldn't be this type of problem at all, right? You wish that it would just be where these minorities would be getting hired left and right. But for some reason, that's not happening. And since that's not happening, since we only have 4 minority head coaches and only 2 minority general managers right now, that's a problem. You have 32 head coaches and you're telling me only 4 of them are minorities? You have 32 general managers and you're telling me only 4 of them are minorities? That's a problem. That's where it becomes a problem. And that's why I'm glad the NFL has made this decision. And I think that they are smart for doing it because this is going to only make their league better. This is going to bring so many more smart coaches into head coaching roles, so many smart leaders and mentors in head coaching and GM roles. And that's what you like to see because, we've always had, and everyone knows this, the Rooney Rule, right? And the Rooney Rule is where you have to, when you're interviewing, when you're looking for a new head coach, you have to at least interview one minority, one African American, to give them a chance to get the job. And that's a great rule that's been in place, but it's clearly not working. And maybe some teams are doing it in a false way where they're just kind of bringing them in and not really giving them the fair interview that they deserve, or what. But it's clearly not working. So they needed to do something a little bit more incentivized for these teams, which again, it is wrong that it has to come to this point. But at least I do believe that this will change things up. And, now teams will get 2 third-round compensatory picks if someone from their organization is hired or promoted to a head coaching or general manager job. Okay, so even if that team, say for some reason Andy Reid retired and the Chiefs promoted Eric Bieniemy, that would also be included as promoting a minority, right? So the Chiefs would also get 2 third-round picks for that. 2 third-round picks, by the way, is a big deal. Those are huge picks. Like this, we're not talking about, 6th, 7th round picks here. We're talking about 3rd-round picks. You can get a lot of really good players in the 3rd round. So that's what, when I read this, I first was just skimming through it. I was reading it and I said, okay, what, are they just kind of making something here that just looks good on paper? But when I read that 2 third-round pick right there, I said, okay, they're serious. I said, this is good. I said, they're open for business here. They really mean this. They're ready to really start to bring some more minorities into their into these jobs when it comes to head football coaches and general manager jobs. And that's awesome. It tells you that they mean business. So I am glad the NFL did this. I'm glad the owners came to an agreement on this, and I really think it's going to make the league a lot better than it already is, which is great. So a lot of news there. Hopefully that wasn't too much, but that was a segment filled with just news that's going on in the NFL, which, when we're in this COVID world, there's going to be adapting, all right? There's a lot going on. You have to pay attention to all of that as we move forward. Now, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, let's get back into football, right? Let's get back into football. Let's have some fun. Let's get back into talking what's going on, and let's talk about Cam Newton, all right? Let's take a quick break. Let's come back, and let's talk about Cam Newton, okay? Yes, everyone went into this Monday night game saying, oh my goodness, kill me, this is going to be an awful game, right? Actually wasn't too bad. And Cam Newton, I liked what I saw out of Cam. Now, I know they're playing the Jets, but I liked what I saw out of Cam Newton. What does this mean for Cam Newton? Everyone's over here talking about, the Patriots could maybe get back in the playoffs. No. I want to talk about what this means for Cam Newton, and we're going to do that right after this. Don't go anywhere.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon. Hope everyone's having a great day, great show so far. Segment number 3, here we are. Segment number 3. Time flies, right? 2 segments down. It's so funny. I'm always telling my friends, family, they all listen to the show as much as they can, right? They enjoy it. Well, they say they do. Who knows if they really do? But they're my friends. They're my family. So they're always trying to help me out. Help those ratings. Those ratings look better and better as much as they can. And a big thanks to you guys as well, because the ratings really have been great. So we appreciate that, and we thank you, everyone here at GSMC, for all the great stuff. Just the great listeners that we have here. And hopefully we'll keep putting out some good content that you guys enjoy. But I always tell my friends, they always ask me, man, how do you talk for, 80 minutes, just going on and on and on for 80 minutes like that by yourself? And it really is an interesting question, because it seems tough, right? You have 20... you have 4 segments of 20 minutes, so 20, 40, 60, 80, but it flies by. When you're not doing it, you think about it and you're like, holy crap, that's a long time. Or even when I'm prepping for the show, it's like, man, how can I stretch this conversation out to make it a 20-minute conversation, so then I don't have to bleed into another conversation towards the end of that segment. Well, as you start to go, you realize, geez, it's already 18 minutes and you still have another 5 minutes to go to talk about. So it is crazy, because it does sound like a long time, like 20-minute segments in real sports talk radio is really long. Like when you're watching shows on TV, or you're watching or listening to shows on the radio, it is very, very rare to hear a 20-minute segment, right, without them taking a break or any commercials. And that's why we love doing this. That's why we love podcasts like this, because we have the luxury of being able to do that. And then we go into like one quick commercial with a song, and then we're right back at it, you know? So hopefully you guys enjoy. I know that's why I enjoy listening to podcasts. I still listen to the radio. I'm a big Sirius XM person because that's how I can get all my sports talk show. I mean, it's very rare for me to listen to listen to music, and it's kind of sad. I used to be big into music, but now all I do will listen to, you know, either my podcast or listen to other sports talk shows around there. And I know when I just said that I listen to my podcast, probably a lot of people were like, wow, this kid listens to himself. I do it to learn. So one of the first things I learned when I got into trying to be a sports radio host or, you know, sports broadcaster is to always go back and either watch if you're on TV or listen if you're on radio, because you will pick up on things every show. It doesn't matter if it was your first show or your 900th show. You will always find things where you said, okay, you know, I could have probably done that a little better, or okay, why did I say that? And obviously, as you get closer to that 900th show, you start to realize there's less of those, or there's not as big of an issue when it's just something little, like you said one word wrong, or you stuttered on something, your English was off on something. When it's closer to those 1, 2, 3, like 20 the lower number shows, you're hearing a bunch of things wrong, and you take notes and you learn, and that's why I did that. And then it was funny because I've already heard that, and then when I got the job here at GSMC, you know, my boss, I call him Mr. Tate, he said the same thing to me, you know, when I had to do a whole 80-minute show just like this to, you know, audition for it. Well, first I had to do an interview one-on-one with him where we went back and forth on a conversation, and that was like my first interview. If I could hold up the conversation, if he liked what I was saying, then I got to the second interview, and it was awesome. It was great. We talked about, he's a big Cowboys fan, right? So first thing he asked me was, what do I think of Dak getting potentially a $40 million deal like Patrick Mahomes got? Now, this was before Mahomes got that contract, but Mr. Tate was already foreseeing this to happen, and we all kind of did here in the media world, and anybody really that just follows this knew that, okay, Mahomes is getting a big contract, Dak will be too. So he asked, what does he think about it? What do I think about it? And he asked me that without me knowing that he's a Cowboys fan, right? So he did that, you know, very thoughtfully, because he didn't want me to try and maybe hold back my answer, for a lack of a better word, because he's a Cowboys fan. So I answered and said, you know, pretty much in a short version, that I don't think Dak is worth that. And it's not because Dak's not a good player. It's because it's going to destroy the team with the cap that they're going to be in, especially after signing Zeke and some of these other guys on defense that they've spent money on. Once they sign Dak, it's over. I mean, this is going to be their team for this foreseeable future, and this team has a lot of holes in it. And while I really like Dak as a player, I haven't seen anything to show me that he can win, you know, the whole thing. And that's the big picture in all of this, right? Now that he's gotten injured, you know, we'll see what happens when he comes back. But I thought, and then after I said that, he said, okay, you know, and he's like, now I want you to know I'm a Cowboys fan. I was like, oh man, like, great, I'm not getting the job right. I just pretty much crapped on Dak Prescott. Even though I didn't, a lot of Cowboys fans, when I say that, they're like, you are a Dak Prescott hater. But Mr. Tate, being smart, being the, you know, owner of a really good media podcast outlet like this. He obviously was a smart Cowboy fan, and he didn't just agree with me. He took it even a step further, and he went on to talk about how, bringing in guys on a different type of deal, bringing in guys like Cam Newton, former MVP type guys like Cam Newton, Heisman Trophy winners, and he even said bringing Cam Newton and like an RG3 as the backup, kind of like what they're doing there with Lamar, and you bring him in on much smaller deals, and then you can build around him. And it was a very smart point, and I know we're getting off track here. And then he also talked about drafting a rookie, which is where the Cowboys might actually get to go here. But anyways, that was I'm sorry we got so off track there, but that was my first interview, and I found that really interesting how he went about that type of interview. He kind of hid like who he was as a Cowboys fan, but then ended up agreeing with me and even taking it to a better conversation where we went on and on. So from there, I had to do another audition where it was an 80-minute one, and it was just like this, so it was like a normal show. I sent it in, and it wasn't just him. There was like him and then 5 or 6 other producers, and all of them had to vote yes. It couldn't just be a couple of them. They all had to vote yes on me, and they ended up doing that, which was great. And I remember Mr. Tate called me, and he was like, "Hey, awesome, really liked what you're doing. We're definitely going to give you the job here. And now what I need you to do for me is listen to your show every time you put it out there, and you'll start to really pick up on a lot of your mistakes." And that was the whole point of this. He was spot on. I really did. Just like what I learned from the first time I got a job in this business, and then, from this job right here. Everyone's preached it, and Mr. Tate even took it a little bit further, talking about how to listen and all that stuff, which I won't go into, but it was great advice, and I loved it. So I appreciate that, and just something don't really know how we got here now. I talk so much I completely forgot, but that is one thing that I always do when I'm in the car. Oh, yeah, that's what we were talking about. Wow, there we go. Talking about how listening to radio in the car, I don't listen to music anymore, like barely ever, because I'm listening to either sports talk radio, podcast, or myself on this podcast, and I didn't want to sound like a tool bag who listens to themselves. I wanted to explain why. So there you guys go. That was a very long-winded version of that, but it is what it is. Let's get into what happened Monday night. Let's get into some sports talk radio here and really talk some sports. Look, going into Monday night, everyone was like, come on, right? This is going to be a terrible game. I decided to throw a little bit of money on it to make it a little bit fun, more enticing. I was going to watch the game no matter what because I have to talk about it for this. But it's definitely more fun when you throw a little bit of money. So I did a nice little tiny parlay of the over on the game plus the Patriots winning just outright, not by the spread. That ended up hitting on a last-second field goal by Nick Folk. Thank you, Mr. Nick Folk. Thank you, Mr. Cam Newton and Mr. Jacoby Myers for getting us in that position. So I went to sleep very happy that night for winning in, cashing in that ticket. But it's kind of funny, right? Because everyone thought it was going to be a bad game, and everybody thought the Buccaneers-Saints game was going to be a great game. Well, it ended up being flopped. Now, the Patriots game wasn't a great game, but it was entertaining. I mean, 30-27, Patriots were down 10 twice throughout the game. They had to claw their way back twice. That's pretty fun to watch, right? Yeah, the players weren't there. The big-time players weren't there or anything like that, but I found that pretty fun to watch. So what I want to get into is, well, how did Cam Newton look? And I thought Cam Newton looked good last night. He had a couple of rushing touchdowns, 274 passing yards, no touchdowns in the air, but no picks, which was crucial. That's the big part, no picks. And Jacoby Myers, my goodness, Mr. Jacoby Myers, former NC State Wolfpack, please stand up. Please stand up. Holy crap, targeted 14 times by Cam Newton, 12 catches. 12 catches out of 14. 169 yards. Like, receiving. Again, right playing in my backyard over here. Can almost see the NC State Wolfpack, we call it Carter Finley Stadium from my window. Not really, but it's probably about a 5-minute drive. And he played there. And he looked like Antonio Brown out there last night. And again, this is against the Jets defense, and Cam Newton was making some great throws, but that was a big-time performance by a nice Wolfpack, former Wolfpack in the NFL, which was cool to see. But so Cam looked good. And, Cam has had a rough year, right? And I believe that the COVID-19 diagnosis affected him in a variety of ways. One, the fact that he actually got COVID-19. And I know that sounds crazy, but the fact that he actually got it, I feel like so many of these guys, they're impervious to it. They're impervious to thinking that they can get it. They're impervious to it. And remember, Odell Beckham's kind of made a joke about it earlier this year. Kirk Cousins did the same thing. I think a lot of those guys believe, I'm not catching it. I'm a professional athlete. It's not going to affect me. And it does affect you. And also it affects him. It affected Cam Newton in terms of him not being able to be out there and practice, not being able to go full speed right away. These players, they need these things. And I think he's finally starting to maybe come out of it and get back to normal. And what I liked most about what I saw from Cam Monday night, and I'm sure Belichick did too. Actually, I know that this is what they have to be. Maybe this is what they're most proud of, was his decision-making. Because I know the Patriots were concerned about his decision-making, especially the last couple games. And what was he going to do Monday night? Was that going to become an issue? But his decision-making was very, very good on Monday night. The decisions were not the type of head-scratching decisions that cost them a couple of games down the road this past month or so, right? And he looked like the guy, and I know Panthers fans are going to hate this, but he looked like the guy that I think the Panthers had hoped he would become throughout his career in Carolina. And what do I mean by that? I mean that he was throwing from the pocket, with accuracy, of course. See, the Panthers never got that Cam Newton. Now, of course, he would throw from the pocket here and there, but the accuracy issue was always a big problem here in Carolina. And last night, we saw him sitting in the pocket, taking his time, reading his reads, going from 1, 2, 3, and hitting the open man in the pocket. Not running outside when he felt pressure, not running away when he felt pressured, or doing some crazy, loop-de-loop dance on the move throw. No, he stayed in the pocket and through the game. And one thing that is so important in the NFL, you have to adjust your game. You have to. You have to be able to make changes and increase your strengths while also decreasing and mitigating your weaknesses. Especially if you want to play deep into your 30s and even 40s, which Cam is getting near his 30s, and he has said that he wants to play into those 30s. So to do that, you can't just constantly run the ball as a quarterback. Your body takes a beating when you run the ball as a quarterback, especially the way Cam runs the ball. See, Cam doesn't run the ball like Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray do. I like to call Lamar and Kyler figure skaters. They're so agile and nifty with their feet and their quickness. They'll juke you out in a second, or they'll run by you in a second. Cam is more of a running back. He is going to run over you. He's not going to go around you. He's not going to spin by you. He's not going to do a little dance and juke by you with his quickness. No, he is going to put his shoulder down and run over you. He goes full steam ahead, and he is great at it. That's why he does it. But that doesn't last long. You have to adapt. You have to adapt. Steve Young did that. Steve McNair, who I loved as a QB, by the way, did that. Aaron Rodgers still moves a little bit, but not like he used to. And he, you have to be able to operate from the pocket if you want to continue to play in this league deep into your 30s. And I know we're going into a more of a motion, running quarterback, dual option quarterback type league, and that's what it seems like it's trending towards, but you still have to be able to step back and sit in the pocket and throw the ball, and then step up and throw the ball. You have to be able to adjust to that type of game, because at some point, all of those guys that you used to be faster than are now as fast as you, if not faster than you, and they hit you harder. So this is exactly what we need to see more of from Cam Newton moving forward. And I think for Cam, it's about laying the foundation for next year, whether he's in New England or somewhere else. And that's the big key here, right? Because this is his chance for the remainder of the season to get people to say, man, this is one of the guys we need to put into the top of the list to evaluate as we look at these quarterbacks. And I get it. They still technically have a chance to make the wild card spot and all that, especially if the league votes to expand the playoffs because of COVID, which, as we talked about earlier, they have decided to do that if games are canceled. That's a big if there. But I just don't see, that happening in terms of the Patriots really being able to make the playoffs. They would have to go on a serious run. And can they do it? Of course. But this team is not talented enough. And if you didn't notice that before, you definitely noticed it last night. Even though the Jets did play really well, they finally had their three best wide receivers healthy, and you could tell that made a huge difference for Joe Flacco. Remember, Sam Darnold was out with injury, and Joe Flacco played well most of the night. But still, the Patriots do not have enough talent offensively or defensively to do what they did last night to better teams. And because of that, and this might sound pretentious, but Cam is fighting for his career. The rest of the season, he needs to prove either to the Patriots or another team that he can still play. I mean, he is fighting to be a starter in the NFL next year, whether that's in New England or somewhere else. But just to be looked at that way again by NFL and the executives and personnel and team members around this league, Cam is going to have to prove some things throughout the last couple of weeks of this season. And that first thing is pocket passing, which has always been a question mark for Cam. But I don't really care who you are, whoever it is. And I mean, we talk about Lamar Jackson all the time on this show and how at some point you're going to play some defense that's going to be able to contain your running. And a lot of people believe that teams have already been able to kind of find a way to do that to Lamar or are getting close to it. I'm not at that point yet, but eventually in this league, you're going to have to make some throws within the general area of the pocket to beat other teams. And to be a perennial top-tier quarterback that can play late into his 30s and be successful. Not just play, but be successful. That's the key. And that's what it comes down to with Cam Newton. And the announcers actually brought this up on the broadcast Monday night. And they were saying, how Cam was doing things early in the year where he was running the offense and doing things and all of that, but he didn't really understand the offense. And see, that totally makes sense because we always hear how complicated this Patriots offense is and how hard it is to grasp right away, and that this will take time to understand the packages of the different plays and to understand the different language within the offense. And this takes us back to what we said over and over and over, like a broken record all season. Teams with new coaches or new QBs are going to struggle in the beginning because they don't have the preseason or normal training camp to learn the offense. So I totally understand that. And I think it was cool to hear Brian Greasy and Louis Riddick talk about that on the broadcast Monday night, because that's exactly what we have been saying on this show. And that was cool to hear, and I agree completely. And by the way, those guys do a great job. You know, Steve Levy as well. It's Steve Levy, Louis Riddick, who's just so smart. He's going to get a GM job hopefully sooner than later here one day. And then same with Brian Greasy. ESPN did a tremendous job putting that group together on the call. Love hearing this. So that's what they were saying, and it makes sense. And it's going to take a long time to really start to get a grasp on that Patriots offense. Usually they do that within the offseason. But again, not only did COVID screw it up for all the teams with new quarterbacks, new coaches, Cam didn't come in until the end of the summer anyways, until the end of the offseason anyways. So he already was short on time. So that right there was a huge disadvantage to go along with the already biggest disadvantage of COVID. And now it seems like he's starting to understand the language a little bit, and he's starting to get over him testing positive COVID-19, get back into game shape and all of that. He played a great game, but can he keep this up? What does this mean moving forward? And does it fit best for him to want to actually come back to the Patriots next year? We're going to take a quick break. We're going to dive into that. And then we're going to wrap it up talking about all the other quick games that went down. We had an awesome game between the Dolphins and Cardinals. Two really good young quarterbacks that look like they're going to be a problem. And a couple other big games. Can some teams make a run here that are a little bit out of the postseason? And are the Chiefs back to being the best team in the NFL? We're going to dive into all that right after this break. Don't go anywhere.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon. Hope everyone's having a lovely day. We are entering quarter number 4 now. Quarter number 4, segment number 4. Coming down the final stretch here, looking to score a 1 or 2, maybe more touchdowns before we end this game and end this show and take another victory under our belt as we ride off into Week 10, ready to go into Week 10. Talk about a bunch of things going on for our Saturday show. We've got a really big time game coming up on Thursday. You know, sometimes these Thursday night games are not the best, but this is why the NFL likes to try and make these Thursday night games divisional battles. Why? Because this is big time, right? Once you start getting to Week 10, Week 11, and you have these Thursday night games that are where two teams are battling it out for possibly, first place in the division or battling it out to get closer to first place. The Titans and the Indianapolis Colts are right there. They're right neck and neck with each other. The Colts are 5-3. The Titans are 6-2. So this is a huge game for the Colts, particularly because they don't want to lose this game and go 2 games back from the Tennessee Titans, right? If they win this game, not only do they tie the Titans, but they would take the lead because they would have the head-to-head. It's very crucial. These division games are really, really crucial, so that's going to be a great Thursday night game. I can't wait for that. Got a lot of good games coming up this weekend as well. I want to talk about what we saw last weekend with the Miami Dolphins winning their second game in a row against a good team from the NFC West. You know, they beat up on the Rams last week. Then they played the Cardinals this week in what was probably one of the best games, if not the best game of the year so far. It was back and forth. It was two running quarterbacks just going at it in the air, on the ground. And you know what? I know Miami won this game, and Tua looks good, and their defense looks good. But the two takeaways that I took away from this game is one, Kyler Murray is special. Kyler Murray might be the greatest quarterback in the NFL at some point in his near future. And I'm obviously not greatest all time, but just actively in the NFL, he has everything it takes with his skill set, with his repertoire, to actually be an amazing NFL quarterback. The way he runs with the ball, and you can see his baseball experience really starting to come into play with the way he slides, which is what Tua does not have. If you go and watch, and I was watching a lot of this game, Tua is one thing we know, and I said this the whole time before Miami was getting ready to start Tua. If I am Miami, I am so worried about how he takes forever to get rid of the football. Now, when he does get rid of the football, what do we know about him? He has beautiful accuracy. He's a great thrower. He can move around inside the pocket, outside the pocket. He can make all the plays with his legs, arms, all that stuff. But his biggest weakness that comes back to bite him and already has in terms of injuries is he holds on to the ball way too long. He can't throw the ball away. And he's still doing that. And another thing is he does not know how to slide. He doesn't. He cannot slide well, which also can come back to bite him in terms of injuries. And that's something you're going to always worry about with Tua. So hopefully he can work on that. I do really like what I've seen from him in 2 games so far. Obviously a lot more to go. But again, the biggest takeaways are Kyler Murray is a beast. Kyler Murray puts on a show every single week. He is fast. He has a beautiful deep ball. I mean, it's just like a air rocket. It just kind of falls into the air for a while and then right into a hand, right into the receiver's pocket. And then the second thing is Brian Flores, the coach of the Miami Dolphins, is already an elite NFL coach. He is already one of the best coaches in the entire NFL. I am so impressed with what Brian Flores is doing. You know what tells me you're a good coach in the NFL? Last year, I was raving about Brian Flores because what happened? They started off the season 0-2. They started off the season like 0-5 or whatever, 0-7. And they were getting beat down. I remember we were talking about, is this one of the worst teams in NFL history? They were losing by like 50 points every game. Halfway through that season, that team was getting better and better every single game. And a good coach will always, even if they don't have much talent, which that Miami Dolphins team at the time did not have a lot of talent. Now, this year, they do have a good amount of talent because they had a lot of draft capital and they had a lot of free agent space to come and bring in guys. And they still have a lot of draft capital going into next year as well. So this team is really set up well for the future, but they're really set up well because of this man, Brian Flores. This team was getting better and better each week last year. Each week they were playing teams tougher. They were winning games. They were doing better at things that they were not good at earlier in the year. All of that points to a good NFL coach. Someone that is fixing the mistakes that he sees on film. You know who else I am seeing doing that right now? Joe Judge. The New York Giants, yes, they've only won 2 games. Yes, they are not a good NFL team. But every single week, the New York Giants have been better and better and better with their play, whether that's on the offensive side of the ball or the defensive side of the ball. Now, as a young team, as a team with a lot of young pieces and not like really sure thing talent yet, you're still going to lose a lot of games. We saw that last year with Brian Flores and the Dolphins. We're seeing that this year with the Giants and Joe Judge. But the key to everything is to make sure you're seeing strides of progress. If you're a bad football team and you just consistently stay bad all throughout the year, that is a really bad sign. But a bad football team that sees itself getting better and better, when you don't have the horses, when you don't have the superstar pieces or the depth on offense and defense, but you're still getting better, that goes to coaching. That's why the NFL, that's why coaching is the most important role in sports. When it comes to all other sports, coaching is still important in NBA, and managing is important in MLB, and coaching is important in hockey, but it is nothing as important as what we see in the NFL, because having a good coach can change everything. And now that Dolphins team has talent, you're seeing the talent win games, but you're seeing Brian Flores take it over the top. You're seeing Brian Flores win games when they shouldn't win. The talent is now winning games where, okay, they should beat this team. But then you're seeing what Brian Flores does on a week-to-week basis of putting together a game plan, watching film, teaching his players. That's how you start to win games against teams that you shouldn't be beating, like the Rams, like the Cardinals. So really just want to give a great round of applause to Brian Flores. I love what I'm seeing in him. I really like what I'm seeing in Joe Judge as well. Matt Rule with the Panthers, that's another team that doesn't have much talent on their team, but they're getting better and better each week. They're playing good football. They're playing better than a lot of people thought. Why? Coaching has a lot to do with that. So there's some really good coaches the NFL has right now, some young coaches, and it's exciting. It's exciting. And what the Dolphins are doing, look, even if they don't make the playoffs this year, this season is a success because they've played better. They're 5-3. They've beaten teams they're not supposed to beat. The draft picks that they drafted look like they're working out. They're going to get a good idea of Tua, and they're going to have 2 first-round draft picks this year again, and one of those is from the Houston Texans, who are probably going to be picking in the top 10 of the draft. All right, maybe even the top 5. So they're going to have a chance to even build this team quicker and better because they're going to have 2 first-round picks, and one of those picks are going to be very, very high. So Brian Flores has just been awesome to watch as a coach, and that team has been very fun to watch as well. I still think the Cardinals are a better team. I still like the Cardinals to make the playoffs. I still think Kyler Murray is just a phenomenal quarterback, but they just weren't able to close out the deal on Sunday. But I do really, really like the Cardinals moving forward. I think Cliff Kingsbury's been doing a good job with that team as well. But Kyler Murray is the heart and soul of that team, and he is such a fun quarterback to watch. Now, I want to flip gears and finish what we were talking about with Cam Newton here, because we were talking about how, Cam Newton hasn't played good football yet, right? Last night, Monday night, was one of the best games he's played all season. And we're wondering why. Why hasn't he played? Is he still banged up? Is he hurt? What's going on? And, this is what the ESPN, I said this last segment, the ESPN broadcast, Brian Greasy said, and Louis Riddick said on Monday night. They said, look, this is a tough offense to learn. And it looks like Cam Newton is finally starting to really understand that. And it's so true. It takes time to orchestrate this offense to its best potential. And it almost seemed like he was starting to get that down, get the hang of it during that Seattle game earlier in the year. But now, if you look kind of forward, pretty much every QB Seattle has faced has thrown for about 350 yards against them. So now we're starting to think, okay, maybe that was more of just Seattle's defense being so atrocious than it was Cam Newton. But in all seriousness, Cam is playing better. And he was playing better then. He then tested positive for COVID, and that felt like kind of a setback, right? I felt like it hurt his development, and he had to get further along in that area as far as, the tricky language in that New England offense, which is very tricky. And you know what? If Cam wants to stick around in New England, and that's a big if here. I mean, Cam seems like he loves Bill Belichick, but to me, that's not the problem. If I'm Cam, I'm looking around at this roster and saying, how can I win with this roster? Even if I become 2015 Cam Newton and go back to Superman mode, I still can't win with this roster. Now, the Patriots will have a ton of cap space to work with. That could be enticing for Cam, but the fact that he is now showing he is starting to learn this complicated offense, I think that 1,000% gives him a good chance to return as the starter next year if that is what he wants to do. Because, look, he can now say, hey, I've gone through these struggles, I've got it down now, and also next year I will be even better. And I'm sure Cam is also thinking, well, do I really want to go somewhere and have to do this whole thing over again, learn a whole new offense over again in the matter of, an off season? Who knows what's going on with COVID then by then too? I don't think so. And I think he can continue to crack away and learn and get better, and you will start to see the genius of this offense come out. Because let's be clear, we're not seeing the entire New England Patriots offense right now, okay? And I know they don't have hella weapons or anything, but they are holding back to make sure Cam gets this down first. And that's why I said at the beginning they were worried about the turnovers by Cam. See, it was great to see him not turn the ball over. But the Pats are not running that Tom Brady, all these intense schemes and different languages and covers like it's a dang math class. They're not doing that yet. No, they don't have the players to do that, first of all. They're too young. They don't even know all the rules within that offense yet. So, yeah, I think if he can continue to stay on the path, he'll start to realize, wait a second. Josh McDaniels, Bill Belichick, they can fit this offense around me really well. And the one thing about this offense is they will make sure to deliver Cam some easy completions, some dink and dunk type completions that Cam is really good at. And Cam will realize it will be a lot easier for him. So I do think that hopefully the foundation can be laid down these last 7-8 weeks or so. And he can become maybe the future quarterback for the next couple of years for this Patriot team. But look, what he did in the pocket, we saw there wasn't much separation from any of the receivers. None of those receivers are threatening anybody deep down the field, right? I mean, if you look at the completion chart, it's a lot of short passes. It's a lot of passes that are around the deep passes are all around the 15, 16, 20, 21. 25 yards is the farthest completion of the night for Cam. But Cam played smart. And I felt like he kind of felt the pressure in the first half of that game. But what I love is he stayed poised. And look, I get it, all right? A lot of you are out there right now saying, Kayvon, what are you talking about, man? He beat the freaking Jets, like whoop-de-doo. And I get that, I really do. But the Patriots aren't a good football team either. And I've been saying this the last couple of weeks. The Jets have more weapons than the Patriots do, and it's not even close. And even though the Patriots are bad, you know that, I know that, most of us know that. They are still the freaking Patriots. So a lot of average fans tune into a Monday night game and they don't realize the poor season that the Pats are having. And they are saying, wait a second, are the Patriots really losing to the Jets? So Cam Newton felt that pressure. He knew if he lost this game, it might be over for him. They might have said, okay, let's just try out Jarrett Stidham for the rest of the year to see what we have in him. He couldn't lose this game. And being down 10 at halftime, He could have came out trying to push the ball down the field, to trying to make big throws to make up for that 10-point deficit quick, but he didn't. He stayed to the game script. He trusted the receivers. He made the easy play, and I was very impressed to see that from Cam. But because usually Cam will come out and try and force a ball or two that ends up in an interception or something. But either way, he adjusted and he made the right play. And the biggest moments he made, some of the big-time throws to help them win the game. You know, one of the realities of learning an offense is the defense is going to try to create confusion, right? And they're going to force you to make difficult decisions, especially if you've been making mistakes. And even more, especially when the defensive coordinator is Greg Williams, who loves to bring pressure in the first place. And he knew that Cam had been playing bad football leading up to this game, so there's even more of a temptation to bring the pressure and do things to try and confuse Cam, right? And look, Cam has faced blitz by the opponent 60% of the time he has dropped back this season. That's the second highest by a quarterback all season long in the entire league. And teams are blitzing to the Patriots 44% of the time. Cam is the only quarterback facing more than 44% of the time of blitzes. So if you're making mistakes, if you're learning a new complicated offense, the best thing for the opponent to do is to disrupt you. Because that's when your brain cuts off, and because you feel the pressure, and if you don't know what to do, and you have to make a quick decision, and here comes the blitz that then accelerates your process, right? And then you're more than likely to make a mistake. So, maybe after a game like this, do teams take a step back and say, okay, we shouldn't do this if he's now starting to figure out where his reads are and what he needs to do when he gets blitzes and he's eluding it and he's going to beat us that way? Maybe this makes teams think twice about it. I don't really think so, to be honest with you, because there is logic to why teams bring the blitz, not just against Cam Newton, but against this Patriot team as a whole. The first thing is people blitz because they go, okay, let's get pressure on Cam Newton, and since the team does not have any receivers that are really going to scare us, well, then we can take the risk. We can play man-to-man and take the risk and blitz. That is the big issue of not having good skill position players. We can man them up and blitz, or we can blitz and play zone and be aggressive behind it. So there's that factor that emboldens teams to blitz. The other factor is, hey, let's try and clog up the lane so Cam can't run around and do something special with his legs like he's done so often throughout his career. But I think with what we saw last night, him knowing where to go with the ball and also didn't take any bad sacks at all, he got the ball out of his hands in those situations. And yeah, that he was pretty on target for most of his throws throughout the night. I think I could maybe it could scare teams off to a degree of like, hey, all right, should we blitz because he really is starting to understand where he's going with his reads. Instead, let's just double up on one of these receivers and take him away, maybe take that Jacoby Myers guy away, so then there's not a lot of options for Cam to go to anyways. But the more he learns this offense and is able to pick his spots and get to his reads, the more defenses will start to back off. But the main thing that will scare a defense is the development of a receiver. A receiver that can get separation or get open and provide the target. And we mentioned Jacoby Myers earlier, 12 catches, 169 yards. That's an impressive evening. It's a very impressive evening. Does that make him into the guy that becomes the favorite target, that guy who is going to relieve the valve, in the event of a blitz? It may have just been one game. We'll have to see. It's hard to tell against the Jets defense because it's not like the Jets have a great defense. But the story on the Patriots for the past few years has been they don't have the receivers who can get separation and make it easier for the quarterback who is being blitzed. And that's a huge reason why Tom Brady left. People can say what they want about Tom being tired of Belichick, and this is a whole conversation for another day, but the main reason Tom left this team is because he had no help. He had no receivers to get open. And there is a reason why he went from the team with the worst weapons to the team with the best weapons. There's a reason for that, and it makes total sense. And that is why it's so hard for Cam, not just to get down the offense, but then to make sure he can hit an open receiver, because some of these receivers aren't even able to get open. So we'll see what happens from here with Cam. But I do like the signs that I saw on Monday night, even though it was against the Jets. I still like what I saw, and I hope that he can continue that progress, because I really would like to see Cam do well and get another shot as a starting quarterback in this league. That is all for today, folks. We really had a lot to go through, but we didn't get done with everything. We will continue that conversation, and we will continue more of the things that we didn't get to talk about on Saturday, as we'll set you up for all your fantasy needs, and we'll really dive into everything going on before we enter the big shebang of Week 10. Enjoy your week. Enjoy your big Thursday night game. Sit back, relax, have a beer, have a glass of wine, watch that. And then we'll talk Saturday. And remember, we thank you so much for listening to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us out. We appreciate all your great reviews. We appreciate all the like buttons that you guys press. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Have a good rest of the week, and we'll talk to you again on Saturday.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.